Good evening, everyone. Welcome to yet another stream. Hopefully I'm not muted or anything silly this time around. So on tonight's stream, we'll be doing a bit more modelling and fleshing out more of the new ship interior. So over the past couple of days, I've just been polishing up some of the ship's internal structure, getting it ready for some of the bracing and attachment points for all the panels. Specifically, so you can see here, I was playing with the idea of having just a single piece of framework with the attachment points for the panels. And I'm still going with the idea of having a full segment along the corridors, because we can use that for things like tracking atmospheric pressure as a single segment all around the ship. But when it comes to things like having a weld line here, where these segments are joined together, unless as part of the construction you were bringing in these pieces separately and welding them into place, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do it this way. So what I've done is I'm having the attachment points as part of the base plate instead. I don't think I've imported the example yet, but essentially the floor piece and the wall piece will be separate. So rather than having them like this, where they're all one piece, they'll be separate pieces. It just makes more sense from a welding it together on a construction perspective, which after all is what all this is about when it comes to the physical structure of the ship. So you can probably see it here a little easier. Just unselect that. So rather than having this and this as one solid object, you've got separate supports welded into place, and that's what the floor panels will be attached to, and then the wall panels will be attached to a separate version on there, which means that this piece, this piece and this piece are two separate framework blocks, which then get welded together along the join line. I don't think this is a different Lofi mix. Lofi Geek has a few different live streams with different Lofi tracks. I can't actually remember which one I used last time. Probably looking in a couple of weeks, at least, for the next demo build. I've got quite a few things which need to be ironed out and smoothed off and joined up. One of the biggest of those issues being the new deck separation. So things like this, you've got things which don't line up, and it's not a huge thing to fix, but it's just something that needs to go through piece by piece, just making sure that all these gaps are all sorted out and fixed up. So the end goal obviously being for the whole thing to look as clean as this corridor does, with all the attachment points and the brackets and the ceiling cavity and everything all in place. One of the challenging bits actually is these little alcoves for the staterooms, because while you've got the curved corridor track, which will have its various segmented pieces, the line of the door is kind of in the middle of where two panels will be, so that segment of the corridor cannot continue across. So this is the new bit here. So you've got this segment, which again, once this is actually separated out into isolated cubes of air, this segment is not going to line up with where this door is, so we'll probably have this area here as its own isolated little segment. And then on the top piece, you can see here how the actual wall line, which is this line here, so this segment and this wall line actually lines up and continues above in the top of the framework as well. So again, all that forms one solid segment of ship. Yes, the VR test should be coming out at the same time as the new demo update. So once the interior design has been polished and fixed, then I can go ahead and do a very basic VR test. Again, it's not going to be an optimized VR test, but you will at least be able to teleport around and press buttons with the motion controllers, at the very least. Yes, this is currently still a solo development project. That will change very quickly though, once Kickstarter completes. We'll immediately be bringing on board a concept artist to work with our backers when it comes to designing ships and things. A character modeler to sort out our animations and character system in general. And probably at least one C++ developer to just work on core systems. Carlton, will you be running pipes and wires in the walls? And will they be persistent? Will they be persistent? Yes. Probably easier to see on this version. So all of the corridor side of the walls will have a cavity like this. And this is where all of the pipes and the cables and everything are going to run. So the individual wall panels will have access panels in them. And you'll be able to open those to access the cables and things beyond. So right now, if I turn on, where are we? B-deck power. So right now, the boxes to supply power to B-deck are actually inside of the data center, and that's likely where they'll stay. Again, B-deck is supposed to be staterooms and the most luxurious part of the ship, so we don't want a lot of exposed things on here. But you can see how you've got the HVAC risers from coming up from below, one per quadrant, which is why there's 4 sets of 2, and that's both input and output air. And then you can actually follow these as they go around B deck. And as you reach the end of a quadrant, you'll see that they're capped off like this, and then the other quadrant takes over. So, like with that, the individual cables and things will be behind the wall panels, and all of that will be accessible when you take the panels off to be able to do repairs and that sort of thing. And they will be static in the walls. So, for example, like this one here, I think, is that the lighting one? Yeah, so this particular cable, that's the aft ring B deck 1, so that's corridor ring 1 lighting circuit. So this cable, right now, obviously it's only that long, but that will be routed into the wall. So that one cable will go all the way around here, and it will end here, because that's where the next segment starts off. So all of the aft lights, so these lights here, and indeed these lights here, will be powered by this one cable, and that one cable will be physically routed through here, and that'll be one solid object. So if you're repairing that cable, you'll be able to do it anywhere along this run here. But each of the individual ceiling panels will have its own cable that comes down and attaches to this cable. So there'll be like breakout points along which each individual light plugs into. So essentially, this contains a ring main. So if you think about it as a lighting circuit in a house, you've got both input and output cables within the same housing. Yes, Kenny. So the live and the neutral are both within one cable. So these here are an entire circuit in their own right. And then they'll actually have breakout boxes along the length of the cable. So you think about how in a domestic lighting circuit, obviously you've got boxes for light switches and things, or in a domestic electrical circuit for plugs and things, you've got the individual plug sockets. So this represents the lighting circuit, and then you'll have plug sockets along the route of this cable where the individual ceiling lights plug into, and they'll be visible. So you'll have a visible box within here, and you'll see a cable dropping down from the ceiling with a plug on the end, which is actually plugged in to that box. So that cable there could be broken, which would stop the one light working, or this cable here could be broken, which would stop all of the lights working that are physically connected to it. Yeah, £5 from Dave there, thank you very much. Yeah, we're not worrying about Earth so much, so the Earth cable is just part of it, and the entire ship's made of metal, so it's one giant Earth sink. Again, like in the last stream, I'm going to try and focus more on doing stuff than I am answering questions, so hopefully Claire can pick up a few of the questions, and anyone in the community that knows the answer. I will answer that question on events though. So how will the vent system work? So while we're sat here staring at the HVAC conduits, each of these will have a breakout point coming down through the wall, and there'll be a physical and visible vent in the wall panel, and that's where air is sucked in. So you'll have output air in the ceiling space. So obviously there's a grill either side of the ceiling panel. In fact, if I turn on that. So above the ceiling panels, you've got the HVAC conduit, and the output air will be outputted up here. So that will just filter down through the grating. But when it's sucking air back in, it'll suck it from the bottom of the wall panels up. So it's creating that circulation. So fresh air comes in from the top, and bad air is sucked in from the bottom. Thank you for the €5, Permabear. Can we still get Commodore after the 5 days on Kickstarter? I don't have any money right now, but I do next week. Yeah, so we have our Patreon and Ko-fi and just PayPal directly, and we'll be making the roles available after Kickstarter's completed. I'm not sure to what extent or how we're going to manage that yet, but generally speaking, yes, those roles will be available in the future. I imagine what we'll end up doing is we'll probably put them on our website so they can be managed directly from there. Right, so if we go back to what we were doing, to aid in the construction of the ship, I've made myself various templates and things. And I guess you can look at these as the construction template for the UN spec of UN ships. Different ships from different manufacturers will have a different spec. But on this particular one, you can see that this is the corridor profile. So you've got the 40 centimeter width of the walls. So this is the wall cavity. You've got the construction of the floor plate. You've got the risers that will support the floors and indeed ones in the ceilings. And then you've got the I think they call them stiffeners in construction terms. So where you've got sheet metal like this, they have these stiffeners welded on just to stop it from flapping around everywhere. I've got my camera stuck in the ceiling. Hang on. There we go. Yeah, so these vertical stiffening plates just keep all this structure nice and solid. But we'll be using those also as the wall panel attachment points. So you'll get a wall panel attached to these points here. And we want visible bolts and things. So obviously carry that through all the way to make it physically accurate in terms of its construction. Because again, we're telling a story here with the construction of the ship, and I want it to be such that if you were to physically build this for real, so if you were to go and get a bunch of sheet metal and start fabricating this thing, it is physically possible to fabricate it. Nothing about it's faked or gamified. You could physically build this for real if you wanted to. And using these templates, just make sure that every corridor, every section of the ship is consistent and all the same dimensions, and it doesn't matter what shape it is or what I decide to go with the layout. The physical construction will always adhere to this template, just to keep it honest across the ship. Yeah, if anyone can hear loads of coughing in the background, that's Claire having what we suspect was probably COVID, because she's been coughing for well over a week now. We did do a COVID test and it did come up negative, but it's only those little packet ones, so they're not very reliable. Thank you, Partially Sighted Paul, for the £2. Love it. See preview. Is that preview you mean? But yes, I'm glad you're enjoying it. For me, this is probably one of my favourite parts of the process, is the actual engineering of the ship and working out. It's not just a case of here's some corridors, here's some rooms, let's throw some wall panels on the wall. It's a case of how are you actually attaching those to the wall, and how is the ship actually being built? Which is why we have things like established weld lines, and even to the point where we're leaving a gap for the weld line so that the welding can actually take place. Because if you were to have this extend all the way across there, there'd be no room to get a welding tool in. So we're thinking about it, or I'm thinking about it, right down to the point of how do you get a welding tool in there to be able to join those pieces together. Yeah, it'd be nice to have a Magellan class theme park. So it'd be really cool if one day we buy some land, because this thing ultimately it's only about 300 meters long, probably about 180 wide, something like that. So it's not huge. You wouldn't need a massive amount of land, and aside from the ring, it's a very vertically based construction, so you could build it. I'm quite confident that you could build this for real, and it would stay together, it wouldn't fall to bits, because it's been engineered that way. So it will support its own weight, and you could build it for real. So it would be so cool to do that. I'd live in it. I'd just say, right, this is my room, I'm living here now, that's it, this is my house. Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, it's been designed as a boat, or rather it's been designed in the same way that boats are designed, so you never know, it might float. It would at least stay together. I'm confident about that. Something I wanted to do earlier, because I started changing the width of this hole, because I've gone with this consistent 10 centimeter lip. So when we're laying down the floor panels, it's got a lip to rest on, so it's not just kind of floating in midair. But I've been carrying that same 10 centimeter lip all the way around, but not on this side. So rather than having to waste time modelling it, I think what I'll do, I'll just cut this in half and mirror it, because it's a very mirrorable a shape. So just take our centre point, draw a rectangle, and then chop. Okay, then we can just separate these two just by chopping that off, deleting all of that. Then clean up the horrendous geometry which SketchUp creates when you cut things. Yay for plugins. There we go, that's that cleaned up. And then we'll group it up, turn it into a component, and now we could happily mirror that. anything I do on this side will automatically also happen on this side because it's a component. Thank you, Aloysius. I hope that's how you pronounce your name. Yeah, I guess when actual CAD professionals see what I'm doing, it makes me cringe a bit because I'm just an amateur winging it. So there's probably a whole bunch of stuff I'm doing wrong. But it kind of makes sense to me logically. Like, down to one of the details I'm trying to adhere to now is like every physical support or every vertical brace has to be 50 centimeters away from the adjacent wall, which this one is, and that gives me that room to be able to fit in a panel there. So we actually need one here as well, again 50 centimeters away, like this one is. So the gap here, so the center point of this brace to here should always be 50, which it is. And then the wall panels are supposed to be 2.5 meters square. So again, that one's 255. So that needs shifting over a little bit. I think I already fixed this side. So that to that should be 250. Yeah, great. So that's a 250 by 250 mil panel, centimeter rather. So that's 2.5 meters by 2.5 meters, and that gives us our square panel. And it doesn't look very big in game, but if you actually measure out how big 2.5 meters by 2.5 meters is, that's a honking great panel. That's huge. So we try not to have anything bigger than that in the game, because again, you have to physically manhandle that as part of the ship's construction. The only thing where that fails is that's not how big the doors are. So the question then becomes, how did they get them in the ship to attach them to the wall? I might make them in 2 halves, which would explain that. Right, so I just noticed that these vertical braces are the old ones, and the new ones are a lot nicer, with proper end caps on them, and they've been chamfered with weld lines. So what I need to do, I'm going to steal one of these, as well as the middle bit. Put some more weld lines there. So if I copy that, paste that there, move that over there. So again, all of these objects are components. So like that end cap is a component. So any change I make to this will also happen on any end cap. So all of these here, you can see they're all part of the same group, same component rather. So you only need to do it once, and it applies everywhere, which does help in terms of speeding things up. Right, so that one doesn't need to be there. And we need a 250 line across there. Should make these a group for easier copying around. And then we'll just take our midpoint and line it up with that marker. So now that is exactly 250 away. And then we know that that one also needs to be 250 centimeters away. Great, so there we have our panels, and not sure why I made that a separate object. Did I mirror this? No, so that can just, that doesn't need to be a group, that can be exploded. So that can go, that can get copied. Now, the grouping of the objects isn't Nanite, that's something that happens in Unreal. What is Nanite is the fact that these are so high poly, so, you know, like, I haven't chamfered this bit yet, but that every edge is chamfered and every edge has weld lines. And, you know, this one piece of framework here, this is already a couple of 100,000 polys. And you know, under normal circumstances, without nanites, that would be very heavy to render. But thanks to UE5, we can do insane things like that, and you know, it's perfectly fine. Like if we look at it in Engine, probably better to look at these ones as an example. You can see that, you know, we've got weld lines, we've got lots of detail, lots of soft edges. And all down here, you can see that every edge has got rounding on it, it's all smoothed, and that's extremely high poly. So if we go to Nanite triangles, you can see that Nanite takes care of the LODs on that quite happily, all on its own. Now it's interesting that this one here, this mesh that's in black, isn't flagged as a Nanite mesh. And the reason for that is because it has windows. And you can't do transparency with Nanite, at least you can't in 5.3. So what I need to do, I need to separate out the window mesh. Actually, does this one have windows? Oh yeah, it will do. It just doesn't right now because I've covered the hole up. But yeah, so any mesh that has glass, I need to separate the glass out as a separate mesh, and then the base mesh can be Nanite. So like with this one, for example, right now it's not flagged for Nanite, but if we enable Nanite support, and then wait for it to do its thing. Right, if we now go into Nanite, where is it? There it is. You can see that it is now using Nanite. And you can see the way that these triangles all change colour as I zoom in and out. That's because it's dynamically reducing the triangle count and handling the LODs, which is all part of how Nanite works. But because of that, you know, we can go to extreme levels of detail when it comes to looking at things up close. Yeah, it's like here, you can see that I haven't pushed it in terms of the poly count on this edge, and just for working with its sake, I probably won't when it's something under the floor like this. You will see this if the floor panel's broken, but I'm not going to extreme lengths with that. That one needs fixing. That shouldn't be there. But yeah, like here, you see what we've left gaps to get welding tools in there. But yeah, without nanites, this level of detail just wouldn't be possible. So thank you Epic, and thank you Unreal Engine. Yeah, these aren't, how would I describe these world lines? Not real. I think that's the best way of putting it. They're there to let you know that that's where something's been welded. But yeah, I wouldn't take them as an example of good quality welding. See, look at that edge there. Look how nasty that edge is. Horrendous. So that comes from the pre-Nanite world. So I shall be fixing that, and it will be nice and round, like this edge right here. So I shall do the same on this side as I did the other side. We shall take our better geometry, copy that over. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Nanite will not save you from bad topology, and you'll still run into issues with things like creasing, like crease lines and things. If your normals aren't nice and flat, then yeah, it's going to look crap either way. But that's just something that needs to be fine-tuned over time. I try and make everything quads wherever possible. Especially when it comes to when everything's made with subdivision. See, one of the things that I did, and this is quite an old mesh, is kind of removing the upper surfaces if something's specifically not going to be visible very often. But it doesn't look great when doing deck renders. So thanks to Nanite, I don't need to worry about it now. I can just add additional geometry, even if it's going to be hidden. And it also encloses the mesh as well. It makes it nice. A nice solid mesh without any holes. Or am I missing an edge somewhere? Somewhere there's a gap. Can't see a gap, but apparently there's a gap there somewhere. I shall come back and investigate that at some point. I'll make these into separate objects anyway, just so that I can model the details and copy it across. I try and keep as much of it copy-pastable as I can, which helps. Like, this is 250, that's 250, so any details here can be copy-pasted here without having to do it twice in the same on this side. I think I will, however, separate this into a separate object. So let's cut this one in half here. Actually, save messing about with it. I'll just make another one. It's just a rectangle. So this piece actually, now that I say that, is a good example of something which needs to exist ship-wide. So like these panels here are essentially the same thing. So they're a 250 by 250 panel, and they're all copies of the same object. So what I should actually be doing is, rather than making new ones, I should be using the ones I've already got. So that you can be, no, you can go and you can go over there. Then we'll paste that panel in there. Copy that over by 250, and there we have the panels. So again, these panels are now consistent with the other ones. And also on this side. Here's a good example of bad geometry. So you can see here we've got these fold lines. And the reason for that is you can't see it in SketchUp because it's doing it in the background. But when that's exported to Unreal, you'll see that it will start trying to add lines in to make it into triangles, because Unreal doesn't deal with quads. So it will triangulate the mesh itself, which is what leads to these horrible fold lines. But you can get them to go away. If you do face-weighted normals, you can get rid of these horrible creases, which I shall do in a minute. Another thing you can do to fix that is, if you grab that and then you put a box around it, that. Then we soften it, so you can see it's better, and if you do that on every edge, it gets rid of some of the creases, and then you just triangulate that manually, which in some cases I will do if it doesn't fix it in Unreal, but you know, generally that's how I would do it. Oops. So something I was actually going to do with this, while I've got it open, is I was going to change the nature of that hole that I've cut through. So if we just make that a nice solid face, and then we do the same on this side. soften that. That will separate this face into a separate object, which means I can then delete it. And then we can remove that entirely. So now we've got our nice clean rectangle with no other geometry. And then I wanted to do a 20 centimeter gap around every edge. And in fact, does that go to the floor? Yeah, it does. Okay, so and then that side needs to come in by 1.25, as does that one. 1.25. That should give us our 20 to the edge of that brace. 19.999, close enough. Close enough is something that I never say, and Claire will be particularly happy to hear me say it, because normally I would be like, why is it 19.999? Why is it not 20? But in an effort for expediency, I've started to stop caring about that a little bit. I'll go with 10 segments on that curve. Hopefully that's high poly enough. Yeah, I wanted to go with having the corridor side of the walls be a bit more open, so that when we're adding infrastructure, and there's going to be some like padding on the back for insulation material, so all that's more visible when the panel's off, and it makes the whole sort of corridor region a lot more three-dimensional when there's no panels on the walls. Right, let's just soften that edge. So we will give that a 0.4 or a 400mm chamfer with 4 edges. Soften that off. Okay, there's our nice smooth edge. Right, so if I now export this, and then we want ring 1, framework, B-deck, rear walls. And this will take forever to export because it's quite high poly. Why asks about trolls in multiplayer servers. Yeah, we've had a few people reporting various issues. Now, obviously, we've got the ability to kick and break and put passwords on things, but it would be nice to have another layer of in-ship security. And I think the way we're going to address that is we're going to add the engineering override code to things like starting and stopping the reactor. So anything which is a critical ship piece of equipment, you'll need the code to be able to turn it off. And we'll have that specifiable, probably in the ship customization somewhere. And that'll be the same code that you use to override door locks and things. Which means in a multiplayer environment, the server host and any trusted members of that server can have that 4-digit code, and only they will be able to shut down the reactor or turn off the fuel pumps or anything like that. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the code of choice. But yeah, I think having code access on those things just makes sense. I mean, you shouldn't be able to walk up to a fusion reactor and press the stop button arbitrarily. There needs to be some kind of, whoops, I've leant on the button kind of control. Yeah, separate codes for engineering and security, that makes sense. It's definitely doable. Do we have any section completed that shows how it will look when all the cables and pipes are routed? No, not really. In the reactor room, sorry, not the reactor room, in the cryo room, on the right-hand side where the helium and helium-3 are, there are some routed pipework bits there. But no, not in terms of walls and things. There used to be, before I decided to do things differently, but I just need to get around to rerouting those cables. Okay, so you can see here that this framework section alone has got 20,000, well, it's like 203,000 polys, which is mental. 2 materials, so as well as the mesh, that's 3 draw cores. So 200,000 polys and 3 draw cores just for this bit of framework, which is mental. And I'm lost. Where's the stairs? So if we now re-import this, and this is generally how my workflow goes. I export the base geometry out of SketchUp after I've done it in there, and then import that into Unreal, at which point we apply the textures and things. We do make heavy use of world-aligned materials, so it's all tiled materials rather than having like a set texture for this object. That allows us to keep our memory footprint down by tiling a material. It means you can go for like extreme levels of detail like this. So up close, you can have like an entirely like almost pixel accurate amount of detail. If you were to try and get that amount of detail out of a single texture for this whole object, it would need to be like a 16K texture or something. So by tiling it, you can get all this detail with very little memory footprint. Okay, so here's what these now look like in game, now that we've done that work. I'm undecided as to whether or not I like just how big those holes are. So the original ones are these, where you've got more framework around the hole. These are a lot more open, which perhaps will look fine once we've got lots of stuff behind them. But yeah, I might try making them a bit smaller. This is a good example actually of why you need face-weighted normals. So I don't know whether you can see, but down the center here you've got this little highlight where that doesn't look flat, and you can probably see it in the corners, but it's like this surface is rounded. It's not a perfectly flat piece of metal. it's almost like it's like bubbled slightly. You can see as well with the way the light, you get this dark section here because it's treating it like it's a rounded surface. But if we select that and we go into modeling, and then we come down here to normals, we can fix this. So if I just do that, hit accept. So what it's doing is it's applying face-weighted normals to that mesh. Now annoyingly, every time I re-import that mesh, it will reset that and I have to do it again. But if you look now, you can see that that line that was there is now gone, and this now looks like the flat mesh that it's supposed to be. We don't have that like dark area creeping down like it was. It no longer looks rounded. And it also picks out the detail on this edge as well, so where the light and the reflections are catching the edge of the metal. It's a big deal for hard surface modeling. And annoyingly, something like SketchUp doesn't do that itself. So when it exports, it has really awful normals. It doesn't do face weighting. But fortunately, Unreal does. So there's a lot of cleanup work sometimes that you have to do in Unreal to the raw object file that's been exported from SketchUp. But that looks much better like that. It's just a shame that it doesn't remember it and you have to do it fresh each time. Yeah, it probably is scriptable. But what I tend to do is I don't bother doing that until I've finished working on an area. So once I've actually finished the modelling, the last thing I do will just go through, make sure that all the normals are face weighted and that kind of thing. Just notice that that's stuck in the floor when it doesn't need to be. Which does beg the question, why is that too long? Because it's not too long over on this side. So that's correct. Oh, is it because I haven't made these tall? Oh, right, yeah. So because I've increased the space between decks, and because I've added these top pieces for supporting the ceiling panels, I've got that extra 10 centimeters of height, which needs to be added to the wall pieces here. And these bits need to be 10 centimeters taller. So what I'll do is I'll remove all the smoothing so that I can select the whole thing, including the edges. And then we'll move that up to 10 centimeters and then re-smooth it. And then that, they all need to come up by 10 centimeters too. And that should fix our floor penetration. Need a couple of panels on that side as well. Yeah, SketchUp set to centimeters. Being that I'm in the UK, we use metric for everything. That on a group, copy it across 250. That fills that hole. Right, and that need to go away. So on the inside wall, we probably can't maintain that consistency with the 250, unless I think what I might do is have, or will I? Because the inside edge is obviously shorter than the outside edge. So the question is, do I line it up with this side, or do I line it up with this side? I think the easiest way to do this, because we know that there to there is 50, 50.002, and that destroys my brain, but I'm going to ignore it. And then we'll just copy this one across. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll have just a bigger panel here. So this is going to be wider than 50. It doesn't matter if it's bigger. So that, it's going to be 69 centimeters there. And bigger is fine. Smaller means that we're starting to deal with a confined space, and it means that it has to have a harsher curve. I generally go 30 centimeters on curves. Again, to try and keep it consistent. And we can still do that there, just with a slightly longer straight bit. So that's fine. I'm happy with that. And then the same will be true on this side. Sure. This is the B deck sort of entrance area into the VIP lounge. So this is the very top of the stairwell. Historically, we've had this issue where there's been this gap down here behind the stairwell, because if we turn on C deck interior, so normally there'd be a corridor there, and that's the edge of the planter. So if we go upstairs, you can see that this gap here would be this gap here, because this center point is where the two physical structural plates are welded together. So this is going to be a weld line across here, where this piece and this piece are welded together, which is this midline here. So because I was using the same mesh upstairs, there was this awkward gap down here. So what I'm doing is I'm carrying it all the way across with a new piece of framework, and actually making it structural framework, the same as it is on FDeck now in the demo build, which gives us this. Yes, it's a large waste of space kind of behind it, but it does mean that we can just fill this area with plants and stuff, and it doesn't give us that awkward bit at the back. So I couldn't work out how I was going to round this off and join that together, and it just seemed easier to do it that way. It's also going to mean a slightly different approach here, because this is the original wall In fact, if I turn on... Where's the VDAC interior? So this is the line of the original wall. Which is fine from a paneling perspective, because that does approximately line up with the new wall struts there, but it does stick out beyond the level of the hole. So this is going to need just a slight redesign here, just to attach this panel properly. And then these brackets need to be the right height, and there needs to be some form of visible hole here, like either a twisty thing or a screw, just something to show that it's attached. I might also make the middle section slightly straighter, so you still got this nice curve at the top and the bottom, but more of a straight bit in the middle, for things like windows and putting in a handrail. So slightly more like the engineering panel, but with easier attachment points. Thank you, Nigel Chan, for the €2. That's appreciated. Actually, another point while I'm talking about wall panels. So in here, you can see that again, these panels here don't line up with these ones. So we have this issue where this panel is halfway between these two, which means we can't turn this into a segmented corridor structure, which is what I wanted to do. And because this is up on the C deck, I went with these rounded framework pieces. Should I turn off the interior? No, not that one. That one. So you can see these generally conform to the shape of the panel, but a lot of people are talking about customization and modding and all that sort of thing. And I really wanted to have these panel sections easier to work with for any shape of panel. So having them curved like this kind of forces you to use a curved panel, whereas having them flat, like these ones, means that you can put any design of wall panel on this corridor section, and it's always going to fit. So it just makes it more flexible for having any type of panel here, which means in the future we can release things like different interior design packs with different styles of wall panels and floors, and they'll just work because we won't need to redo the framework to make them fit. Thank you again, Nigel. What happens if we get stranded in space? Do we call the space AA? There are going to be lots of mechanisms in place for making it easier to, or rather, avoiding being fully stranded. So the ship will have solar panels for charging things like the emergency batteries and the basic batteries on the ship. We'll have the ability to plug in a shuttle, again, to do the same thing. So you can use your shuttle's power supply to charge up those batteries. Things like the FTL drive don't use a physical fuel, they're electrical. So all you need is that electrical power for those things to work. The FTL capacitors will be able to power the FTL drive for a few minutes. We don't exactly know how long that's going to be yet because we need to test that out, but we want to get it as such that if your main reactor's offline and you don't have the fusion reactor running to continually top up the FTL capacitors, you can at least charge those capacitors up, do a small hop of maybe a couple of light years, and then you're out of charge, and then you have to recharge them and do another small hop, and keep hopping your way across the galaxy until you find a gas giant where you can refuel and start the reactor or anything else you need to do. So there will be ways of dragging the ship through space. So you shouldn't ever be completely stranded unless everything's got so broken that it's beyond repair and you've got no resources or materials to repair it. Yeah, sorry, I did actually turn the music down because it did get a bit louder. Hopefully it has quietened down again now. Yeah, so the fuel scoops are going to be underneath the front section, which isn't modelled yet. So under here, engineering is going to extend down vertically all the way to the base of the ring here. So there's going to be a vertical support structure, and that vertical support structure will be housing all of the capacitors for the FTL. So if you imagine a vertical fin covered in heat sinks, that's essentially what that's going to be like. The fuel tanks are going to drop down to a lower level, and in front of the fuel tanks there's going to be what I hope won't look like a deflector dish, because we don't want it to look like a deflector dish, but it's probably going to look a bit like a deflector dish here, which will be the gas scoop hardware, with all of the tanks and things immediately behind it. So that is G-deck there. So right now that's this is the extent of the current G-deck, and then that needs to drop down a bit. So I imagine each level of engineering is going to be 2 decks tall. So G-deck will actually extend over 2 decks, so it'll be a very tall deck. And then the vertical fin, we won't give that a deck number because it's literally just going to be a support gantry filled with capacitors and a stairwell. So there will be a stairwell going all the way down to the bottom, probably a zigzaggy one, so a zigzaggy stairwell all the way down to here, where you'll have all the FTL attachment points for the FTL hardware. Yeah, we don't need to do any reactor remodeling because everything that side is going to stay as is. Why is that looking? I've just realised that that's not what it should be like. Why is that inverted? That's weird. So you should be there. Weird. Okay, that's better. That was me messing with it the other day. But yeah, so the reactor itself won't need remodeling. None of that's moving. It's only the fuel tanks which need to drop down a bit, just to make them in line with the collection hardware. So yeah, so in here, so this whole panel needs remodeling now, bringing forward a bit. And one of the reasons I changed the size of the hole here is to deal with this bit. So again, this was a very early thing that got added, but I was never happy with how this attached onto here and how that blended in. And we're going to have the same issue here, where you've got a curved wall panel probably meeting another curved wall panel, and there needs to be a curve there, but then that bit's flat. So this needs to blend smoothly into this, and I'll probably do that with subdivision. So I'll just make a sub D mesh, get it all nice and blended in smoothly. But this is now segmented, so these are going to be separate panels, like the engineering one. And then Claire needs to come through and do some planting. Claire actually did a really good job on the prior design, the prior layouts, because I just threw these in quick just to give it a bit of foliage. But she went through and did some flower arranging and did some little rock formations, and she had this like little Japanese rock stack thing going on. It looked really cool. And then I just viciously deleted it all. So yeah, she'll have to come and do that again. Yeah, we'll definitely have an aquarium somewhere. So yeah, another thing I need to do. So here you can see that the floor is all one solid piece, and that needs to be built into segmented pieces, just like the engineering floors, so that each one has its own health values and can be damaged and broken and removed to reveal all the delicious framework underneath. Yeah, I might replace the lollipop tree with an aquarium. There's no room for it on this site, but in the wings on C deck. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Lost here. So yeah, on here, an aquarium up the middle might look pretty cool. Instead of a lollipop tree. We'll have to see. How that looks. Yeah, since I've moved everything around, you've got these little bits protruding now that I need to trim. Right, let's steal that. Bring that over here. Yeah, over time it would be nice to have lots of different interior decor options, so that, for example, if you didn't want plants all over the ship, you could have rock gardens or something like that. It does mean building all those as separate options, but yeah, it could be a good option to have. So these supports here, these aren't going to be bridging across a weld line, so we don't need that separation in the middle, so that means this one can be unique. And then that across here. And again, for consistency's sake, each one of these is 1 centimetre away from the edge. Although these ones won't be welded, this will be a curved edge here. Which means this one, which should not be a component, except I did make it a component. Make it a unique one. Join that up. And join up the weld line. Gives us our support. I need to work out actually exactly where I'm going to put these brackets. I know that we're going to need one here and then one kind of there, so they need measuring out properly, but I need one for the edge piece and then 2 for the center piece of the floor. So regardless of whatever floor panel we're putting here, it's going to have the same approximate layout. Right, then that just needs to go 250 that way, which should make it line. Oh no, no. It'd help if I lined them up first. Okay. And again, 250 that way. And then, yeah, so they're part of the floor piece. And there'll also be a ceiling version of that as well. So if we turn on the top bit of framework. So lore-wise, the sheet metal on top, the lid to the bit where the human habitation happens, and this cavity above, that's all one solid piece of construction. In fact, if I take that, and that, so we copy these up here somewhere. So what the shipyard will be spitting out would be this piece. Obviously this needs cleaning up because it's got a bit sticking out where it shouldn't do. But this is one piece of ship. So this is what the shipyard produces. And then this gets welded on top of what would be this section here. So this is the top of the piece below, which has obviously the layout approximately of the deck above. So then I've lost it. What did I do with it? Oh, of course I turned it off, didn't I? Yeah, and then this piece, as a complete section, gets welded onto the top of the deck below, and that's exactly how like modern cruise liners and things are built. They call them mega blocks. It's quite awkward to work when everything's all turned on because you get the camera stuck in everything. I need to grab that, copy them, and then I need to go into this object, make sure that we're in the right one, yep, paste them in place, move them up, flip all of those vertically, and then stick them to the ceiling. Lose the camera. Okay, and that now forms our complete attachment points to everything. Actually, I might just export that one. I've got it here. So Let's take this piece, export this. So this is BDEC, framework, rear top. Shouldn't take as long because there aren't as many high poly bits on that one yet. Yeah, when it comes to 3D printing, so Ollie Nani's just asked, why do these bits have weld lines if the thing's 3D printed? That's mostly just down to speed of construction, because looking at how 3D printing works as a medium, now obviously we are talking 3D printing in the future, but it is still quicker and easier to weld bits of metal together than it is to 3D print them. So for something simple anyway, if it's a complex shape, then 3D printing it is better because you're not having to deal with the complexities of that object. But when it's like a straight line like this, it's quicker and cheaper on materials to literally weld the piece on than it is to spend time building that up with additive manufacturing. Yes, thank you. The next dev stream aid will be on Wednesday at the same time. So I try and stream every Wednesday and every Sunday. That's at 8 PM UK time, and we're in BST at the moment. So that would be 7 PM UTC, I believe. True, yeah, 3D print does have lines where it's adding up the layers. Yeah, unless I'm struck down with the lurgy, I'm practically over it now. Still got a bit of a sniffle, but I'm okay. So this one's actually the C deck ceiling. Where are we? C deck rear sheet metal. That one. Yeah, well, as a studio, we had every intention to be open development and just share the journey. Really, I mean, it's this is our life, you know, kind of building the game and fleshing it all out, and it's nice to share that experience. There's a lot of people that wonder what it's like to be an indie dev, so yeah, it's nice just to share what that is like, being an indie dev. And also to share our method, and how we're actually doing this as well. Hang on a minute, why didn't that show up? Check I'm on the right file. So Ring 1 framework, C deck, rear sheet. Sure, that's what I exported it as. Ring 1 framework, C deck, rear sheet. Perhaps I didn't. So these, obviously these supports need some runners as well, again to support the floor plates, and we need to decide on what the pattern's going to be here, because there's going to be a security desk at the top of the stairwell, and that's going to have a separate floor piece around it, so we need to work out what that's going to look like in terms of physical floor plates. So that's that. That is part of C deck top, so that needs moving. I'll get rid of this bit, it shouldn't be sticking through. And then this piece here, that just needs some ceiling detail added. Can't remember if I even exported it now. Oh, I did. Yeah, okay. So, obviously this bit doesn't have ceiling panels yet, but they'll be the same as these ones. But those ones would probably fit. Same dimensions. So we'll have ceiling panels attached to these attachment points here. Floor panels attached to these points here. And then wall panels on these. So that's all the attachment points for all the various bits and bits that we need. Yeah, so the top one's going to need a different number of brackets to the floor, so that needs to be a unique object. That can stay as 2, so that's alright. So let's fix that floor. Then do the vertical bits. Yes, Christopher, you are right. I'm using SketchUp. I started my game dev life as purely doing ArchViz work. So using something like SketchUp just made sense because it was CAD that I was working on. And it's just stuck. At some point, I'm going to learn parametric modeling and doing a completely parameterized design, so it's not doing any physical modeling at all, but that's a skill I'm going to have to learn. Fix that? I might have already fixed it. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, I started fixing it. Right, so that then can just be exported out directly. It's missing a bunch of stuff, but it'll do for now. So this one would be C deck rear top. that. So that piece needs the outline of this. It's bringing down, and it needs holes cutting through for the ceiling there. Okay, otherwise that's all right. So they're not being interrupted by bits sticking through the floor anymore. Yeah, there's a very good reason I don't use Datasmith, and that's because Datasmith creates everything as separate objects. So if your mesh is made up of lots of different parts, they all get imported as physically separate meshes, and all of those meshes use the world origin as their origin, and it's really messy. It's fine for an ArchViz project, or if you're doing some rendering, but for game dev, then I don't find Datasmith works very reliably. I much prefer having the control over being able to export, a single mesh like this, and then work with individual meshes rather than having Datasmith manage that. When you say make the interior customizable, question there from Hunter Hopkins, wall panels and things, yes, so I turn those on. So things like the floor designs and the materials and the colors are already completely customizable, and we want to do all of that on a per deck basis as well. So things like the wall panels, it would be nice to be able to replace this with, say, the style of panel that's used in engineering. So if you don't want the nice curvy design and you want something that's much more sort of aggressive looking with sharper lines, then you'll be able to switch that out. You can already make them any color within the game. And I think I'll also add some metallicity controls to the textures as well. So if you want them to be metallic looking, then you can do that. If you mean this big room, this is the lounge. If I turn off the interior, then this is what the lounge looks like. With some floaty lights and things. It's a good example actually of how the ship has a physical framework behind everything. So if you turn on the walls, you can see that they're actually, those panels are actually attached to proper points on the framework. I did fix the lighting in the lounge, yes, it's fixed. If I turn off my magic super light, you'll be able to see it a bit better. Super light off. Yeah, so the lighting is all working now and all optimized. And if we turn on the shader complexity view, you can see that that's much better as well. Shader complexity. See, look at all this green that wasn't there before. Obviously the glass is still a nightmare, and glass is unavoidably a nightmare, but everything else has lovely, lovely green. These ones I haven't done yet, which is why they look absolutely awful. So yeah, that's the shader complexity overall in the project is going to be a lot less in the next demo update. And this is why I have a magic light, because otherwise you can't see anything. Yeah, the life support and things like internal air temperature and stuff will all be on the environmental control station on the bridge. So you'll be able to adjust like what the ambient temperature is in the corridors and things like that. Yeah, so to aid in navigation, we do have lots and lots of wall maps and things, and they will be rolled out more fully across the ship. So things like deck maps, with you are here, flashy things, they'll be all over the place. I'm trying to make it so wherever there is a junction, so like here, when there's a choice of direction, we'll put a wall screen there. And the same like at this end. We'll put a wall screen here because this is where you would be deciding where to go next. That aside, another thing we want to do with our per deck customization is you could have different coloured wall panels on a per deck basis, or different coloured handrails on a per deck basis, just to make getting around a little bit easier to see. Yep, there will be a VR demo when the next demo build goes out, and again, it's just going to be a very simple demo where you can teleport around, maybe with arm swing, depending if I had that, and use motion controllers to prod buttons with your finger, so you'll be able to physically press all the ship controls in a room scale VR environment. It's probably going to be quite laggy, so you'll need a decent system to run it. But yeah, at least you can go in and have a look. Regner, yeah, last time I tried Datasmith it was in UE4, so that was probably about 5 years ago, and I've not tried it since, so let's have a look. I'm sure it will be fine for things like structural framework, because this stuff does use the world origin as its origin point, just for simplicity's sake, really. It doesn't move, it's fully static, so it doesn't really matter. But for other things, like wall panels and stuff, you really don't want them using the world origin. What was I doing? Right, yeah, floors. Yeah, the bridge will have an access hatch in front of the helm that leads down into the into the data center. Really, it's meant as an emergency exit, and it will only be openable from the bridge side. But there will be a way out in case the normal way out of the bridge is blocked for some reason. So we want CDEC sheet, right, and then we need our handy dandy guide. So this tells me where the different carpet segments and things need to go. So like on here, for example, we know that if I just rotate this, so in terms of where that needs to line up, I know that that needs to line up with this line here, and then we need another one there, because that's the edge of where the floor plate is going to line up. physically within the game, this will be one solid object for all 3 pieces, but in terms of how it's visually laid out, it'll be like those 3 floor plates. But if we were to make them physically 3 floor plates in the game, that means 3 times as many floor objects, which is a bit crazy. So that should be a 1 centimeter gap across there, which it isn't. Though actually, it's probably a good way of doing it. So if we line that up there, so that's 0.75, I believe. So from there to there, yeah, 0.75 of a centimeter. Is that both of them? Yeah. And if we then make that 1.75, that gives us that gap between the weld lines. And then these need to be unique. Actually, I'm just thinking these are the same arrangement as the ones down on C deck. So that 1259, 1259. So that's the same 250 centimeter gap, I believe. Let me just confirm. Yes, it is. So that means that rather than making another couple of objects, we should be using that one and not these ones, because we don't want to lose the benefit of being able to edit them all at once. So you need to line up to this. And I think what I will do with this one is, because this one isn't using the new handy dandy end caps that I made, so I will take the contents of this one, copy that, delete all of that, and stick that in there instead. And make sure that's lined up. Move this out of the way a minute. Right, so unless I got this wrong, that should still be lined up down on C deck. And it's also using the new separate end cap version, which generally makes it more flexible to work with. Right, so that should be lined up on here. Almost. I shall sort that out when I get down to C deck. We get quite a few questions from people saying, you know, how is this viable? How are you possibly going to make this? And this is how, by utilizing things like components and like every bracket is the same object, so you edit one and it edits all of them. You know, things like that make this feasible as a project, because you're not having to do absolutely every bit of it manually. A lot of it you can just copy paste stuff. I should really put some brackets on this side as well, just to attach that last little segment. I don't think we need them in the middle, although I might put some little L-shaped, just little bits of metal there just to help support the floor. Right, so for the middle bit, I guess the first thing we need to do is kind of figure out the scale of the desk. Although I did already do that on F deck, so I might just borrow that. So F deck interior, that should have. Here's one I built earlier. So that's kind of what I had in mind as a security desk. Obviously that's just a rough model, but something like that. So one or two guys just sat there on chairs with a few security stations, controlling access down to the engineering level. And then we'll have that same thing up the top as well. So if I just copy paste all of that up there. So it would be something like this. And you can see already, because of the consistent design measurements and everything used all throughout the ship, this already lines up with this. I have to change the width slightly, but it all lines up already, which is just, again, it's the benefit of using consistency in the design. So I think we'll have maybe one floor piece there, taking up that whole space, and then 1, 2, and third little one there, and then yeah, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 there. Have a little one at the front, and then we'll maintain the idea of having a strip there. So we just need to work out what the overhang is going to be on the corridor floor pieces, because they need to overhang the lip either side slightly, just for added support. See, when I built this last time, this was pre-Nanite again, so you've got some pretty horrendous edges here. It'd be nice to redo that and really smooth it off. Right, so I think just as an experiment, I'm going to stick that on there. And then we'll export that and see how much room actually leaves us to walk past. Because what we don't want to do is block access into the lounge too much. Okay, so again, this is Ring 1 Framework B deck. No, sorry, C deck. Rear sheet. Because it's the top sheet of C deck. I always get myself mixed up and confused because the floor of one deck is actually the sheet metal top of the deck below. I mean, it's a little bit on the chunky side. Obviously the stairs will come up here. Might make it a bit thinner so it doesn't quite take up as much room. And then VIP access obviously has to walk past the security desk. I could maybe make it more of a, rather than having it wrap that far around, just have it more of a little crescent shape. Because the idea of having this here is that the only access you have coming up to B deck, which is kind of the VIP/command area, is either through the main lift shaft here or the stairs on either side. So you can't get anywhere on B deck without having passed the security desk. So it's quite well secured as an area. Yeah, we're not going to have Star Trek style force fields that you can just create anywhere on the ship. They are very energy hungry, power intensive things within this game, so they're going to be used sparingly. But I think this is a reasonably decent vantage point. So, you know, you have the high ground if anyone is coming up the stairs. You've got a nice area here for protective cover, and again, you know, in the lounge itself, you've got a lot of protective cover here. So if someone's coming up the stairs, you very much have the advantage, unless they're kind of down here and snipe you without you realizing they're coming, or they just open the lift doors and come out guns blazing. But I'd like to think that at that point you would know that there are hostiles on the ship, so you wouldn't just be sat there twiddling your thumbs. But yeah, I definitely think that this needs to be less long, so there's more room to get through, so you're not blocked there. That's the bit that's kind of bothering me. Yeah, I think lift overrides and the closure of doors and bulkheads from the bridge is definitely going to be a thing on the internal security station. Because like down here, like this is a bulkhead. They don't have doors in the game yet, but these are actually bulkheads. So you'll be able to close and lock these from the bridge. Yeah, I don't want to enclose the security desk too much. Really, it's just somewhere to sit for a security guard. It's not like in an office building where you've actually got, you know, a proper desk and everything all set up. It's just a chair where they can sit and challenge people. You could have some ensign off exploring the ship, and they can come up the stairs, and the security guard can say, you know, should you be here? Do you have an appointment? Are you here to see somebody? Really, it's just like an information desk. Hey, yeah, like a little wooden stool. Give him a little wooden stool, and he can sit in the corner somewhere. Or like that guy that sits in front of all the fans in the Men in Black films, reading a newspaper. I am wondering actually whether I should bring that edge in just a little bit. Does it need to go that far over? I've aligned it to be exactly in the middle of this panel, just because I like symmetry. But I am wondering whether it sticks out a bit too much. Yeah, someone pointed out having the ability to read on the ship, because there are a lot of books which are out of copyright these days. So we would be well within our rights to include historical works of fiction as like a readable pad or something within the game, or literally a physical book you can leaf through. And yeah, to be honest, I see no reason why not to do that. So if there is a famous work of fiction and it's no longer in copyright, then yeah, why not stick it on the ship to read? The data center is going to be where, well, exactly as the name suggests, really, it's going to be a server farm. So everything on the ship, from the reactor to the engines to the shields, they're all going to have a data processing unit associated with them, and the data center is where those things will live. So if you go and turn off the FTL computer, then the FTL won't work anymore. Simple as that, really, or if it's broken. So this will be where all those things live. Yeah, and Ava, the ship's computer, she'll be sort of front and center in here, so we'll probably have her as like taking up almost half the room, with like AVA in big lit up letters on the side of the server rack, just so, you know, like a big Cray mainframe, but with Ava written on the side of it. Yeah, I also like the idea of having actual data storage units, and for those storage units to have an actual physical purpose in the game. So the data that's stored on them is the data that you have scanned and recovered whilst you've been out exploring. So if that data unit is broken, then you've literally lost that scan data. So really put some physicality behind that hardware. Just trying to remember how far that needs to be. So that is exactly 60 centimeters. So if we do exactly 60, then that lines up with our floor runner, so that can go around there like that. Autosave getting in my way. Thank you. Yeah, optimization is very much something we're focusing heavily on. So at every step of the way, we're trying to optimize as much as we possibly can. Griff Rogers asks a very good question about the galaxy, and whether or not it's temporary until we get the actual astrophysics we need to make it more fleshed out. Yes and no. So the galaxy, as it stands right now, the individual sectors, each sector being 100 light years cubed, each one of those sectors has a seed which is derived from the coordinates of that sector, and that seed will never change because the coordinates never change. So the random distribution of stars within that sector should never change, because you're not messing with that coordinate, that seed rather. But I'm going to change that so that it uses Perlin noise instead to generate the seeds, because that way we can have an infinitely sized play space. By having them limited to the XYZ coordinates, you are limited to the seed space, which is minus 2 million to plus 2 billion, on an int32. But by doing it with Perlin noise, we can derive the seed number anywhere within that 4 billion available integers that we have available to us, anywhere across the universe. Now obviously they're going to repeat, but they won't repeat within the galactic space because there's enough of them to go out that far. And we're also driving density of stars based on an image map. So the actual pixel value of that image derives just how many stars are being generated. So whilst, like, when we extend out to the large and small Magellanic clouds and the other dwarf galaxies that surround the Milky Way, they might get a repeated seed number from the main galactic disk, but because they'll have a different pixel value from the image map that we use to generate that sector, it will generate a different number of stars. And we'll also use multiple layers of noise so that the individual star systems themselves have dual layers of seed structure. So they have the base seed that they get from their sector seed, but then they also have an individual seed which is driven from another layer of noise. So by having these multiple layers of noise, it means we can make essentially an infinitely sized galactic space, rather than just deriving it directly from the XYZ coordinates. That's the plan, anyway. But I think doing it that way means that we can really push out the play space without having to worry about seeds. But it does also mean that when we switch to that system, the galaxy as it stands right now will have to change because all the seeds will be reset. And I know that, like Elite, for example, I guess is the most famous example of this, because they've had to have a few galactic resets over time. And I know that their galactic structure is very sensitive to that, so any change kind of ripples across the whole galaxy. Now, I've specifically built our galactic structure so that doesn't happen, because we're generating each sector in isolation. Any changes we make largely only ever affect that one sector of space, which means the integrity of the galaxy as a whole is always maintained. And even beyond that, every type of object, so every type of star class, for example, has its own set of seeds. So all the O-class stars have their own seed space, and then all the M-class stars have their own seed space. So you can make changes to O-class stars without affecting any other star class in the galaxy. And you can do things like changing the density of that particular class of star. And because we do it in a layered approach, so we can change the density of O-class stars without then affecting the other classes below it. And we put a lot of effort into that system to make sure that we can add new content to the galaxy without resetting the whole galaxy every time we do so, which is quite a big deal with a game like this, with a procedural universe. Yeah. Yes. So once we've set it in concrete, so once that layered noise solution is in place for generating seeds, that should then never change, because we'd have no reason to go back and change it. The only time I could think of when we'd ever want to change that is if UE5 supported 64-bit seeds, because right now it doesn't. The random streams only support 32-bit integers. If they increase that to 64-bit, then I think we'd want to take advantage of that, because that opens up the seed space to a ridiculous number. But yeah, that aside, I can't think of any reason why we'd ever need to touch the galactic structure again. Yeah, so the galactic space is the same for everybody. So what you see is the same as what everyone else sees. Now, right now, because we're basing it on the Cartesian coordinates of the sector, that is set in stone, that can't be changed. When we move to a noise-based system instead, it can be changed, but I don't think we're ever going to want to, because part of the exciting thing with this, at least for me, is everyone having the same shared experience, and for people to help each other mapping the galaxy, and having galactic mapping projects, and that just wouldn't be the same if you could roll the dice on the galaxy and have a completely different galaxy every time. I think the galaxy is big enough that you're never going to explore it in your lifetime, so it doesn't matter that every player has the same galaxy. I mean, Elite is a good example of that. It's like 0.01% of their galaxy has been explored since Elite was released. And if you think about how many thousands of players they've had, and how many thousands of hours, probably hundreds of thousands of hours, have been put into that game, and it's still only 0.01% of the galaxy's been discovered, I think that kind of puts into perspective just how big the Milky Way is, and how you're never going to run out of content. Or run out of new things to see, rather. Oh, it's 0.06, is it? Sorry, yeah. I knew it was a small number. Yeah, if the fact that some sectors are going to be empty doesn't really change how seeds or our seed space availability, because the estimate in science for the number of stars in the Milky Way is about 100 billion, but our seed space is only 4 billion, so we're already significantly short of how many stars there actually are in the galaxy, which is why we need to use other methods to make everything truly unique. So whilst the base seed for that star, or that planet rather, could be duplicated thousands of times across the galaxy, the individual specific bits of that planet's generation are going to be unique. So you're not going to have the same star system seed with the same planetary seed with the same planetary conditions with that planet's position relative to that star, or even the same star class. So even though you'll get two planets with the same seed, the outcome of that seed will produce a very different world, because it could be a lava planet or it could be a gas giant. And even then, the temperature of that world plays a part in what that seed does for that world. So the exact combination of different factors is going to be very rare to duplicate across the galaxy. Right now there should be at least 11 ships for early access. So that's going to be the Magellan class that we're working on here, finished and polished, in addition to all the backer ships that we'll be building as well. Bearing in mind that the backer vessels won't be of the same scale as the Magellan class. They're going to be sort of around about a 10-person crew, approximately. Yeah, they don't necessarily need to have a lot of modularity or asset reuse, because the construction like this, the way it's being built, the framework of the ship will be very similar to this, and I'll probably use the same the same kind of templates for building that. They're only going to be, say, 3 to 5 decks in size. They're not going to be huge ships. So it shouldn't take too long to make each one. The process we're going to be using for these ships is where each Fleet Admiral backer that has a ship will have their own dedicated channel on Discord, which will be private just for them. And then we'll have a concept artist who'll be working with hopefully all 10 of them all at once. And we'll be doing that pretty much immediately, as soon as Kickstarter ends. So we'll find that concept artist who is really good at designing ships and ship interiors and that sort of thing. And we'll be getting them to work with all of the backers to create the look and the feel for their vessel, the basic silhouette of the outer hull. And once we've got all that signed off, then what I'll probably do is I'll make the physical internal structure, so all the framework and that sort of thing. And then once the framework's done, I can then hand that over to a 3D modeler. So we'll find a really good hard surface modeler, and then they can use the concept art from the concept artist and the physical framework structure that I've given them, and then build the interior, within that space that's been designed. So we should be able to do those 10 backer ships reasonably quickly, because it's not just me working on it, there's going to be a team involved. Yes, the backer ships will all have their own shuttles. Yeah, we'll probably have other yachts and things over time. Obviously the Admiral yachts will be the first one we do. But we'll have to see on that. I've been toying with the idea of making the Admiral's yacht an actual vessel in its own right, FTL capable with its own shuttle, and able to fly alongside the Magellan. So if you've got Admirals who have joined a multiplayer game, they can actually spawn in their own ship and take a shuttle across to it. Size-wise, so this ship, the Magellan class, this is pretty much Voyager-sized, I think. So it's 300 meters nose to tail, and about 180 wide, I think, last time I looked. So it's practically the same size as the Enterprise refit. So if you think about the saucer would be there and the nacelles would come out to about here. So it's about Enterprise refit sized, which I think is also about Voyager sized. Hang on, Google it. Okay, so the USS Voyager was 343 meters long. So this one's about 40 meters shorter than Voyager, but a fair bit wider. Voyager-esque in terms of its scale. Yeah, there's a bunch of missing hull here which you can't see, so the actual silhouette, bad angle, the actual silhouette will come through like this, so they'll have a ship around there, and also here with some engines on the back. The Orville is apparently 600 meters long, so it's half the size of the Orville. But obviously, a lot of the Orville's size is in the giant engine rings at the back. if I turn on a couple of the layers here, you can see. So this is what the actual shape of the ship is. So imagine that, obviously, with a ring around it. And that's the nose bit you can see in the game right now. That needs to have windows cut through, because you've got like a central mall area in the middle. So windows above, stairs at each end, planters and seats in the middle, and then all the crew facilities kind of hanging off of that. The large park area at the front. And then it's going to have some big old engines at the back. Yeah, it's one of those things where it doesn't matter what shape you make the ship. There's going to be a Star Trek ship that's that shape. It's just unavoidable. I think when you add up all of the canon ships, all of the fan designed ships, there's going to be one that looks like it somewhere. It doesn't matter what shape you come up with. If it has a smooth hull, it's going to look like one Star Trek ship. Yes, all the stuff you see me working on right now is going into the next demo update, which we are a few weeks away from, depending on how long it takes me to get this done. Thank you, Joe Lovell. That's very much appreciated. Carlton Shell. Yes, I did work on the Orville. I was a former project lead on that. And I was working on that for about 3 years or so before starting this back in 2021. I really wanted to build something which was a really physical one-to-one. This is how we'd build it for real vessel. And this is something I've wanted to build my whole life. So yeah, so I stepped away from the Orville and made this instead. Yeah, I think it's quite guppy shaped, like a fish guppy. So I could say there's like a bit of an aquatic design going on there. But there's actually a building. Hang on, just looking for something a sec. So in China, there's a large kind of resort / aquatic museum, like ship museum type building, and it's very similar to what we've got here, and I cannot find a picture of it, annoyingly. Or can I? So this building in China, you may notice some similarities. So similar deal where you've got a bit down there at the front, bridge on top, stick a ring around that, and you've essentially got this. So I'd say it's much closer to a physical building on Earth than it is any known cannon vessels from any show. Okay, I'm just going to do one more bit to this, and I think I will be calling it a night because it's been 2.5 hours now, and I need a cup of tea. I'll redo this edge because I'm not happy with how jaggedy that is. That's not the smoothness we've come to expect with nanite geometry. Yeah, that building could very well be a spaceship. There was a much nicer picture of it somewhere. Typically, I can't find it. Apparently, that building has 7 Guinness World Records. That's kind of cool. That's it all lit up. It's the kind of thing I'd build. Like, if money was no object, that's definitely the kind of thing I'd build. Because that's just cool. Oh, Claire sent me a picture apparently. Oh, well done, Claire. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so that basically, that with a ring round it, is essentially what we're building. I don't have the rest of the hull in engine at the moment, so I can't show you the actual proper shape. But yeah, it is essentially that. So instead of these wing bits at the edges, we've got the ring going around it instead. But it's a very, very cool building. I think the one that got into trouble was perhaps this one, for obvious reasons. Yeah, that one. There's a better picture of it. Yeah, that's I'm sure that raised my eyebrows. Yes, there will definitely be more Magellan-sized ships. I mean, this one is the first experimental vessel, and the next one's going to be the next big one. Rather, is going to be the Pathfinder class, which is going to be this, but sleeker and sexier and just generally nicer in every way. With the next one, we'll probably do away with the ring and just have a curved section instead. So we'll chop the top and the bottom of the ring off to make it more sleek. And in the lore, it will be the case that, you know, having the full ring was obviously the very early form of the technology when it was in its infancy, and then we figured out how to do it without the full ring. So we'll still have the field coils on the edges, but it won't need to be a full ring anymore. And then we'll probably drag that back more towards the rear of the ship, and just have it flatter and sleeker and more streamlined looking. And then we're planning on making a lot of various sized ships, all the way down to like a single person exploration vessel. So it can just be you on your own, on your ship, with all the things you need, your own little shuttle, to explore the galaxy on your own if you want to. And then all the way up to, you know, big cruisers. And yes, and there will be lots of different classes of ship, from trading vessels to military vessels, and we'll probably implement those as and when those things are needed as part of the story. Yeah, we're never going to have nacelles. That they'll always be vertically orientated, just to, you know, satisfy certain things. Right then, okay, I'm going to leave it there. So I shall leave you with this view of the ship in construction. Hopefully I should be able to get, in fact I will actually, for the next stream, I'll get the outer bit added back on again, so you can see the ship like properly built and see the actual silhouette properly, because it's hard to picture it when it looks like this. Thank you. Was that Acting Commodore? I can't see the rest of your name. Thank you for the $10 US though. That was very much appreciated. And I'm going to go and have some tea Earl Grey hot. And yeah, and then I shall continue with a bit more modelling later. But thank you again, everyone, for joining the stream. Hopefully it continues to be entertaining. You may laugh at $10 for tea, but the tea I do actually genuinely drink Earl Grey, and it's not because of Star Trek. It's because of my mum. My mum has always drunk Earl Grey her whole life, and you know, by extension, so have I. So it's just kind of coincidental that that's a Star Trek thing. But a box of Twinings Earl Grey is something like £4 or £5, which isn't far off $10. Random fact. There we go. So yeah, thanks very much everyone, and I shall be back on Wednesday evening at 8 PM BST, where I will either be doing more modelling or more work on the sensor side of things. So I shall see you then. Bye for now.